Hi guys, today I bring you the story of the Spotted Devil of Gummalapur by Kenneth Anderson. The word spotted definitely gives us the idea of a leopard. Yes, it was a leopard that is basically common to all tropical jungles of the forests of India and has lived in the jungles of the southern peninsula since the earliest of times. The tiger, on the other hand, had been a recent entry than the leopard from the northern parts of the country. The leopard is smaller in size and therefore has lesser strength and has an inborn fear of human beings, because of which the leopard or panther, which it is also known as, is looked upon with a ridicule and at times coupled with astonishing carelessness. These are the two factors that has resulted in the maulings and occasional deaths of otherwise extremely courageous but cautious tiger hunters. When leopards attack human beings, it is hardly with the intention of killing the person, but it limits itself to a series of quick bites and quicker raking scratches with its small but sharp claws. But in the case of a tiger, few people live to tell their story that they have been attacked by a tiger. However, this common rule has an exception, and that is that the panther that has become a man eater. Although they rarely become that, but when they do occur, they describe the panther as an engine of destruction quite equal to his larger and powerful cousin, the tiger. Since the size of the panther is much smaller, he can conceal himself in places that are not possible to a tiger. His requirement for water is far less, and he has no equal when it comes to possessing a genuine fiendish cunning and daring, and an uncanny sense of self preservation and stealthy disappearance when danger threatens. Such type of an animal was the man-eating leopard of Gummalapur. He killed some 42 human beings and had the reputation for being genuinely cunning that almost exceeded human intelligence. There were some very fearful stories of extremely evil craftiness that had been attributed to him, for which the panther was held in awe throughout an area of some 250 square miles, over which it held irrefutable influence over it. The door of each hut in every one of the villages within this area was fastened shut before sundown. Some even piled up boxes or large stones which were kept for the purpose. And the people opened their doors the next morning when the sun was well up in the sky, and they ventured out of their houses to expose themselves. On finding out that its human meals were becoming increasingly difficult to obtain, the panther became proportionately bolder, and in two instances it burrowed its way in through the thatched walls of the smaller huts, dragging out the screaming victim out the same way, while the whole village lay awake and trembling behind closed doors, listening to the shrieks of the victim as he was carried away. In one instance, the panther was so frustrated from making his way through the walls, which were boarded up with rough planks, that he decided to make in through the thatched roofs, which turned out to be quite a novel way. In this instance, he found it difficult to carry away his victim back through the hole from which he came. So, in a sudden, uncontrollable, and violent attack in fury, had killed all the four inhabitants of the hut. A man, his wife, and their two children. Then he clawed his way back into the darkness and to safety. The villagers enjoyed any respite only during the day. They moved around in large numbers and was also armed. But there were no instances of the leopard attacking anyone in daylight, although he was definitely seen at dawn within the geographical area of a village very frequently. This was the situation at Gummalapur when Anderson arrived to an invitation by the district magistrate called Jepson to rid his area of this leopard who was giving them much trouble. Speaking with the people of the village, he found out that they were dejected beyond hope and had decided to resign themselves to the fact that this shaitan, as they call the leopard, had come to stay, and they would be devoured by him one by one, or they would have to flee the village, which appeared to be the only alternative. They could see no way by which they could be rescued from this danger. Apparently, he got very little cooperation from the villagers. Many of them had openly even stated that if they helped him, they would be devoured by the shaitan, as they call the leopard. They spoke in whispers lest the leopard would hear them speak and then single them out for revenge. That night he sat in a chair in the middle of the village with his back to the only house that possessed a 12-foot wall. After taking necessary precautions to cover the roof with a deep layer of thorns and brambles, just in case he should be attacked from behind by the leopard leaping down on him. It was a moonless night, but the sky was clear and promised to provide sufficient light from its extremely large and countless stars to enable him to see the panther should it approach. By 6 o'clock that evening, found the villagers behind locked doors while he sat alone outside on his chair with his rifle across his lap, loaded and cocked, along with a flask of hot tea nearby, a blanket, a water bottle, some biscuits, a torch at hand, and of course his pipe, tobacco, and matches as his only consolation for the long vigil till daylight returned. As the sun went down, a period of acute anxiety set in because the stars were not as brilliant enough to light the scene even dimly. Moreover, the two hills situated to the west side of the village brought uncertainty to the fact that there was going to be any proper light available, which might have otherwise been lessened by some reflection from the recently set sun. He gripped his rifle and looked around him, his eyes darting in all directions and from end to end of the deserted village street. Under such a situation, he would have welcomed sitting in the jungle, whereby their cries of alarm, the animals and birds would have him warned of any imminent danger of the predator's approach. He definitely relied on these cries of alarms, whereas in the present situation there was a deathly silence. It appeared that the whole village might have been deserted, for not a sound escaped from the inhabitants of the village who lay silently behind closed doors, maybe even anticipating to hear the screams that would herald his death and perhaps another victim for the panther. Time passed by, and by 7:15 p.m., one by one the stars became visible to throw sufficient light to enable him to see along the whole village street, although somewhat indistinctly. Anderson found his confidence returning and decided to think of some way to lure the leopard towards him if he was in the vicinity. He coughed loudly at intervals and at times talked loudly to himself. He hoped the panther would hear his voice and come to him quickly. By 9 p.m., he got tired of talking to himself and got up and walked around the streets of the village. After some time, he deliberately walked up and down the lanes of the village, again talking loudly to himself. After realizing that he was exposing himself to extreme danger, as the panther might pounce on him from any corner, from behind any pile of garbage, or from the rooftops of any of the huts, he stopped talking immediately and returned to his chair, thankful to get back alive. Time dragged by slowly, and by midnight he started feeling cold and drew his blanket around himself. When he found himself growing sleepy, he consumed some hot tea and biscuits and splashed some icy water from the bottle on his face. He did a quick limbering exercise by raising and lowering himself on his chair. It helped revive him a bit. Then he went to talking to himself again. At 3:30 a.m. came an event that caused him immense discomfort for the next couple of hours. Sharp winds started blowing, bringing banks of heavy clouds along with it, and soon covered the heavens and obscured the stars, making it intensely dark, which made it difficult to see the panther even if it was a yard away. He thought that he had undoubtedly placed himself in an awkward situation by planning to sit outside. He was entirely at the mercy of the beast now, should it decided to attack him now. Next, what he did was he started flashing his torch every half a minute from end to end of the street, a procedure which was necessary if he hoped to be alive in case the panther was anywhere in the vicinity. He knew that he was ruining his chances of shooting the beast by doing so, as the bright beams would probably scare it away. But that night the vigil turned out to be futile. He snatched a few hours of sleep when morning came, and at noon he went out to question the villagers again. On finding out that Anderson survived the night, quite contrary to their expectations, they were more communicative towards him and gave him a few more particulars about the beast. Apparently, the leopard wandered about its domain a great deal, killing erratically and at places widely distant from one another, and something he had already found out, never in succession at the same village. As no humans had been killed at Gamalapur within the past 3 weeks, there was a possibility that it might do him a favor in staying where he was, instead of moving around haphazardly. Another factor against wandering around was that this beast was rarely visible in daytime, and that made it practically out of question of meeting it as might have been in the case of a man eating tiger. The panther was wounded in its right forefoot, since it was in the habit of placing the pad sidewards, which Anderson was able to confirm later when he actually came across the tracks of the animal. After lunch, a plan was conceived for the night, which was to leave a door of one of the huts ajar and to place a lifelike dummy of a human being at the half open door of the entrance. The villagers welcomed the idea and placed the hut at his disposal. This hut was the next one through which the leopard had entered from the roof and killed all the four inhabitants of the hut when it could not get out from the way it had come. A lifelike dummy was created made up of straw and old pillow or jacket, and a sari was wrapped around it. This was placed within the doorway of the hut in a sitting position, the door itself being kept half open. Anderson positioned himself in a sitting position behind a low parapet of boxes placed a little bit diagonally so that he was hidden from the direct view of the doorway. The floor of the hut measured about 12 feet by 10 feet. He was confident that from this short range he could easily shoot the panther. He then instructed the villagers living in both the adjacent huts to talk in a low tone along the night. The villagers at first raised objections. They feared that on hearing their voices, the leopard might enter one of their huts and attack them. On being promised to help, should they hear the animal attempting an entry into their huts, they overcame their fear and agreed to talk in low tones and would give a signal cry of help, of which the panther took no notice. Everything was in position by 6 p.m., at which time all doors in the village were secured except for the hut where Anderson was sitting in position. But the hours dragged by, and there was silence except for the fact that he was disturbed by the rustle in the thatched roof made him become alert, but he realized that it was only a rat running around. Another night passed without any success. He was in position again the next evening at 6 o'clock. Shortly after 1 a.m., a sharp wind sprang up. This rapidly increased in strength till it was blowing quite a gale. The sky became overcast with storm clouds. Soon there was a heavy downpour. He thought that he was going to draw a blank again that night because he knew very well that the leopard, like all the cat family, were not overfond of water, would not venture out on a stormy night. The murmuring voices from the neighboring huts became inaudible. Among this downpour, Anderson fell asleep, obviously tired out from the vigil of 2 previous nights. How long he slept, he did not know. He woke up abruptly with a start, with a feeling that all was not well. His jungle training and long years spent in dangerous places enabled him to remember where he was and in what circumstances as soon as he woke up. It had stopped raining and the sky had cleared a little because the open doorway was more visible then, with the crouched figure of the dummy seated in the doorway. Then, as he watched, a strange thing happened. The dummy seemed to have moved, and as he kept looking, it suddenly disappeared from view and then accompanied by a snarling growl. He realized that the panther had come, saw the crouched figure of the dummy in the doorway, which it mistook for a human being, then went on to stalk it, creeping on its belly so low that its form could not be outlined in the faint light. The panther growled after realizing that it was not human after all. Anderson dashed out, switching on his torch. He shone the beam of torchlight in both directions, but saw nothing. Hoping that the panther might be lurking nearby, he shone his torch beam into every corner and walked slowly around the village street, cautiously negotiating the bend at its end and walked up the next street, fearing and trembling of a sudden attack. But although the light lit up every corner, every rooftop, and every likely hiding place in the street, there was simply no sign of his enemy anywhere. Then he came to know why this panther had the reputation that it had acquired of possessing diabolical cunning. Just as Anderson's own sixth sense had awakened him from his sleep at a time of danger, a similar sense had warned the leopard that there was no ordinary human being in there, but one that was out for its destruction. Maybe it was the bright beam of the torchlight that unnerved it at the last moment, but whatever the reason might be, the leopard had disappeared silently and effectively. Anderson was disappointed and annoyed at himself at having fallen asleep, but he was overcome with determination to get the beast at any cost. Next morning, he went out to inspect the area. The tracks of the leopard were clearly visible at the spot it had entered the village and crossed a muddy drain, where he saw for the first time the pug marks of the leopard and the peculiar dent of its right forefoot, the paw of which was not visible as a pug mark, as it remained a blur due to the animal's habit of placing it on edge. Thus, it had become clear to him that the panther had at some time received an injury to its foot, which had turned him into a man eater. Later on, he was able to observe the injured foot himself, and he found himself wrong in his calculations that caused the panther to become a man eater. He came to learn that the animal had acquired the habit of eating the corpse of people who had died of an epidemic of cholera and were left into the jungles to be eaten by the vultures by the people of that area. These easily procured meals had given the panther a taste for human flesh, and with the injury to its foot, had made normal hunting and swift movement difficult. Hence, he became a man eating panther. Anderson knew that all his cunningness and human like power to calculate the situation, he would not make another appearance in that area again for a long time after the fright that he had given him. It was therefore obvious that he would have to change the scene of operations. So, after considerable thought, he decided to move on to the village of Devaravatta. It was some 18 miles away, situated diagonally across an intervening range of forest hills. The panther had already killed 5 victims there, although it had not paid any visit there for a month. He set out for Devaravatta early morning that very day, after an early lunch, and arrived there just after 5 p.m. On arrival, he quickly searched for the hut with the highest wall, before which he seated himself just like the first night at Gummalapur, after having hastily arranged some dry thorny bushes across its roof as protection against attack. From his rear and above him, Devaravatta was a far smaller village than Gamalapur and was situated much closer to the forest. He welcomed this fact because he was sure to obtain warning notes from the birds and beasts of the jungle if any predatory animal was passing by. Nightfall came rapidly, and there was a new moon showing this time in the sky. The occasional call of a roosting jungle cock and the plaintive call of a peafowl answering one another from the nearby forest told him that all was still well. And then night fell, the faint light from the moon hardly making the complex, winding, and filthy lane that formed the main street of Devaravatta visible. At 8:30 p.m., a sambar hind belled from the forest. Her cries went on in succession with her original sharp note with a series of warning cries. Undoubtedly, a predatory animal was moving around in search of prey that had been seen by a watchful deer who was telling other jungle folk to watch out for their lives. Was it the panther or was it a tiger? Time alone would tell, but at least he had been warned. The hind stopped her belling some 15 minutes later, from the direction in which she had first sounded her alarm. He heard the low moan of a tiger, which was repeated twice in succession. Then all was silent again. It was not a mating call that he had heard, but it was a normal call of the king of the jungle in his normal search for food. Time passed by, and then some movement caught his eye down the lane. Raising his cocked rifle, he covered the object which was slowly approaching him, walking in the middle of the street. He began wondering whether it might be the panther after all. But would it walk so openly and in the middle of the path without any attempt to conceal itself? It was now some 30 yards away, still continuing to walk on boldly without making any attempt to take cover or trying to creep along the edges of objects in the usual manner of a leopard while stalking its prey. As it kept approaching, he saw that it was a mongrel who appeared to be very frail and slender. He switched on the torch which he had clamped to his rifle. It fell on the street dog who was starving and lonely and had sought out human company, feebly wagging a skinny tail in unmistakable signs of friendliness. Anderson too welcomed the mongrel and called it to his side by flicking his thumb and finger. He offered him some biscuits and a sandwich. It looked up at Anderson with dumb gratitude after eating the food and curled up at his feet and fell asleep. Time passed by and then came midnight. A great horned owl hooted dismally from the edge of the forest. Its long lasting, mysterious call of hoo hoo sounded like a death knell or a harbinger to that haunting part of the night when the souls of those not at rest return to the scenes of their earthly activities to live over and over again the deeds that bind them to the earth. 3 hours dragged by monotonously. He strained his tired eyes and ears for any movement or sound. It was a cloudless night and visibility was good, as the stars appeared in the heavens in a glorious arrangement. And then abruptly, the alarmed cry of a plover, or did you do it bird, as it is known in India, could be heard from the nearby muddy tank on the immediate outskirts of the village. Did you do it? Did you do it? Did you do it? Did you do it? It called in rapid regularity. There was no doubt that the bird was disturbed, and it was excited, or it must have seen something. The stray dog at his feet stirred, raised its head, then went back to sleep again. The minutes passed by, then suddenly the dog became fully awake. Its ears, that had been drooping in dejection, were now standing on end. It began to tremble violently against his legs, while a long growl came from its throat. Anderson watched it, and he noticed that it was looking down the lane that led into the village from the surrounding area of the tank. He stared intently in that direction. He watched for a long time and saw nothing. And then it seemed that a shadow moved at a corner of a building some distance away and on the same side of the lane. He focused his eyes on that spot and after some time noticed a cautious movement so as not to be noticed. But this time it was a little closer. He placed his left thumb on the switch of the torch, ready to light it, and waited in breathless silence. After 5 or 10 minutes at the most, he saw an elongated body spring swiftly and noiselessly onto the roof of a hut some 20 yards away. It so happened that all the thatched huts were built adjoining to each other at that spot, and he guessed that the panther had decided to walk along the roofs of the adjoining huts and spring upon him from the rear side rather than continue stalking him in full view. He immediately got to his feet and went and stood with his back placed against the wall. The roof passed over his head onto the road to where he was sitting was about 18 inches high. He kept his rifle ready, his finger on the trigger, his left thumb was placed on the switch of the torch, which was pressed to his side and was pointing upwards. After a few seconds, he heard a faint rustling in the dry, thorny bushes that he had placed on the roof against any attack of the leopard from behind him. He very clearly failed in this, for there was silence again. Now he had no idea as to where the leopard was. His next 15 minutes passed in terrible anxiety. He kept glancing in all directions in an attempt to locate the leopard before he sprang. He thanked the Almighty that the night was clear. Suddenly, the dog, who was restless and whining at his feet, shot out into the middle of the street, faced the corner of the hut against which he was sheltering, and began barking vigorously. The warning bark from the dog saved Anderson's life, for within 5 seconds the panther charged around the corner and sprang at him. He just had the time to press the switch of the torch on and fire from his hip full into the blazing eyes that showed above the wide open, snarling mouth. The .405 bullet struck squarely, but the momentum of the charge carried the animal onto him. He jumped to one side, and as the panther crashed against the wall of the hut, emptied two more rounds from the magazine into the evil spotted body. It collapsed and lay still. There was a spasmodic jerk of the still open jaws and long extended tail. And then the dog rushed in and fixed his feeble teeth in the throat of the dead monster, just to show his faithfulness to its newfound master. This was how the spotted devil of Gummalapur was killed. A panther of whose actively harmful tactics he had never heard like before, nor did he hope to meet again. Next morning, while skinning the animal, he found out that the injury to the right paw was not caused by a bullet wound, as he had earlier perceived, but by two porcupine quills that had penetrated between the toes within an inch of each other and then broken off short. It must have happened quite a while back because a cartilage type of formation between the bones inside the foot had covered the quills. It must have hurt to put the foot down in a normal way, and that is why he had acquired the habit of placing his paw on the ground on its edge. He took the dog home with him and named it Nipper. Nipper lived with him for many years, and he never regretted the fact of giving him the few biscuits and sandwich that won his heart and caused him to repay that small debt within a couple of hours by saving Anderson's life. So, guys, this is where I come to the end of my story, The Spotted Devil of Gummalapur. If you have not subscribed to my channel, please do subscribe. Thank you for listening and bye for now.